Hey, what's good, everybody? It's CJ Beatz. We're back at it again today. Today, I have a very special guest. Today, we're going to be interviewing an entertainment lawyer by the name of Mark Quail. I already formed a list of questions that beat makers and producers like myself would ask an entertainment lawyer just to get a better understanding of entertainment law in general. We're going to talk about it right after this. Hi guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. I have on the line right now Mark Quail. He's an entertainment lawyer. Mark, thanks so much for coming on to my channel and talking a little bit about entertainment law to music producers and beat makers. Could you introduce yourself a little bit and then we'll go from there?
Absolutely. Good. Thanks again for having me on the show, Chris. I enjoy what you do as well. Yeah, I'm an entertainment lawyer. I've been practicing in the field of music law predominantly for about the past 29 years.
Wow.
My practice is restricted to music-related matters. I've done some film and TV, but that usually ends up being with respect to the composers and the people putting music into the show. I do some new technology work as well, but again, that usually centers around music-related technologies, apps, and some of the other technologies, algorithms, and et cetera, that are being used in the music business.
Very cool. Could you let us know of any people that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a mixed bag of clients over the last 3 decades, everybody from gospel artists to heavy metal bands to record companies. I was a co-owner of a record company up here in Canada called Distort that did extremely well with a couple of amazing bands, one called Alexis on Fire, the other one called the Cancer Bats. I've over the past several decades, I got involved in the electronic music scene, and my clients have it's one of those situations where some clients get success and they tell two friends and they tell two friends. So
Right.
I've got a practice now that centers largely on electronic music, representing people like Richie Houghton, John Aquaviva, Dubfire, Art Department, Pleasure Craft, numerous other Premier League DJs and producers, plus their record labels. That forms the bulk of my work these days.
Okay, so I already formed a list of questions that beat makers and music producers like myself would probably have for you. Would you say that it's better to hire an entertainment lawyer first or try to hire a manager first?
I would say the first professional that any musician ought to retain is going to be a lawyer. And the reason being is that if you're going to sign with a manager, most likely you're going to be asked to sign a contract, which is going to have a binding effect over a period of years. Whereas when you retain a lawyer, generally, you retain that attorney on a case-by-case basis. And we can talk a little bit about how some of those arrangements work. But you are not being asked to sign a long-term contract for exclusive services when you work with a lawyer. Whereas with a manager, you're going to be asked to not have any other managers. That's what I mean by the word exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And you are going to, in essence, be married to that manager for a period of years. If that relationship breaks down, or if you shouldn't have got into it in the first place, or if the deal is bad, you are going to be unhappy as an artist in your career, and that is going to have ramifications. Whereas with a lawyer, if you don't like what's going on, you simply discontinue using that attorney. And we can talk, I guess, a little bit about how attorneys can get retained in a sec. But the ties that you have with that attorney are not binding in the same way that they would be if you sign a management deal.
Got it. Yeah, that's really good to know, because I'm sure that a lot of the times beat makers and producers, when they're trying to get in the music industry, they are trying to search for a manager right away. Thanks for clearing that up. Why is an entertainment lawyer essential for, let's say, a beat maker or producer?
Well, the thing with lawyers is and attorneys, when you hire them, their job is to act in your interest.
Mm-hmm.
They take your instructions. If sometimes people are maybe hear the phrase conflict of interest, and what that means is that the attorney is representing both sides of the equation. They might be representing you, the artist, and the record company. That presents a conflict, because how can that attorney represent any one party's best interest when you are representing both parties?
Right.
And the advantage and the whole idea behind lawyers in acting in your interest alone, is that you've got a champion, you've got a representative who is going to be looking out for your best interest, who will be paying attention to all the details and making sure that you're not getting into something that will be harmful for you down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of perspective and that type of professional assistance is essential in getting into complex commercial contracts,
Mm-hmm.
which is what record and publishing agreements, in fact, most agreements in the music industry are complex commercial contracts. There's an assignment of rights, or a retention of services, things that are going to have a binding effect and an important effect on your career, on your art. And having somebody look after your interest is essential to make sure that you're covered, that you're not getting into a bad deal that might end your career.
Yeah. So entertainment lawyers are always going to be on the musician side, versus somebody that's a manager that could be on both the artist side as well as the label side, right? I think I got that clear.
The manager might not be in a conflict of interest, but and in fact, that probably doesn't come up so much. But the thing with the manager is you will have had to have signed a contract in most cases. Any professional manager is going to want to have a management contract with the artist, so that the manager knows that the artist can't just pick up and go.
Right.
Managers are going to put in a lot of time. Sometimes they're going to put in money. If a professional manager, anybody worth their salt, is going to put in valuable time into the artist, they want to know that that artist is with them and won't just change their mind one morning and go to a different manager because now the deals look different and things are looking better. And maybe that manager put in several years of work, and now the good stuff is about to come, but the manager gets kicked to the curb.
Mm-hmm.
Not a good situation. So you can see why managers want a contract.
Yep.
But to get into that contract, you need somebody to look over the deal, make sure that it's cool, make sure that the terms are fair and appropriate.
Yep.
And in that way, the artist can go into that deal with the manager with their eyes open.
Yeah.
And again, like I say, with lawyers, you retain lawyers. You can hire and fire as many lawyers as you can afford.
Right.
I say that with some degree of humor, but that's the truth of the matter. If we talk about that for a second, generally, when you retain an attorney, it can be done in two ways. Either on a fee for services basis, like you'll pay an hourly rate.
Mm-hmm.
They might be able to give you an idea how many hours it'll take to complete the deal.
Yep.
Or what's also common is an engagement or a retainer relationship where you pay the lawyer 5% of your gross income. In return for that, the attorney will look after all your music affairs.
Gotcha.
They probably won't look after your divorce or your criminal matters or any tax-related matters. Those are going to be separate and apart from that. But the attorney will look after all your music-related affairs. They will get 5% of your gross income, and that means income from all sources: your live, your publishing, your record stuff, recording stuff, your merchandising, anything that's related to the music industry, that income stream, the entire amount, the gross amount, before any agents take any commissions, etc.
Yep.
5% will be paid over to your attorney, and they continue to work. If you discontinue the relationship, most of those retainer letters say that's the end of it, that the lawyer does not get 5% forever. It's just 5% while they're working on your deal.
Gotcha. For the time
And
that you've worked with that entertainment lawyer. Yeah.
that's right. So in that case, if a deal took 20 hours, well, that lawyer is going to get 5% of the gross.
Yep.
Versus if the deal took 20 hours and your lawyer is earning or charging, $400 an hour,
Yep.
do the math, you'll figure out what your fees are. If you're a major label artist making a ton of money, I mean, you can imagine what 5% of Taylor Swift's gross income.
Right. Right.
It would be
Exactly.
substantial. I can guarantee you, though, that there is a lot of legal work that any star at that level is going to have. So those lawyers are going to be busy.
Yeah.
But 5% of a new artist coming out of the gate, you can probably figure that the lawyers are going, okay, this artist looks like they've got some potential for a big career. They're going to be signed to one of the major labels. They're going to get on bigger tours, et cetera. That 5% down the road is going to be substantial. So while it might not be a lot of money now, we see potential. We'll put the time in, and we'll do all their work, and they will ideally be able to recoup the time they put into that artist. And ideally, they'll keep that artist happy, and that artist will just keep coming back and keep the lawyer on retainer and have a good long career and a profitable one.
Perfect.
So those are the two main ways that attorneys get retained and get compensated for their services.
Perfect. Thanks for clearing that up. And besides, watching out for an artist, musician, are there any other services that entertainment lawyers can provide?
Well, an entertainment lawyer, let me make a medical analogy. If you go to an ears, nose, and throat specialist, that is what that lawyer or that doctor is going to cover. You have a heart problem, don't go to that doctor, go to a specialist.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, it works the same way in the legal world. If you've got a problem or an issue dealing with intellectual property, you're going to want to go to somebody whose practice is restricted to that area, who does really nothing but.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a tax problem, I won't go to an entertainment lawyer, I'll go to a tax lawyer.
Right.
A divorce problem, I'll go to a family lawyer. So if a musician is signing a record contract, I would not recommend they go to a family lawyer. That lawyer may be very skilled, but does not know the ins and outs of a 60-page major label contract that is looking to sign all sorts of rights from that artist. Go to a specialist, somebody who's been through those contracts numerous times, who knows what should be changed, what can be changed, what the alternatives to various paragraphs are, and what to request from the lawyer representing the record company, mm-hmm. or the manager, or whoever it might be on the other side. Again, it's a specialized field. Go to somebody who knows that field, and that way you're not wasting money. You're, as an artist, you're not paying for somebody to educate themselves, yep. in that field. Somebody could say, oh yeah, sure, I can do your deal. They go to an entertainment law textbook, they start reading up on it, and they try to get through a contract that way. It happens. Mm-hmm. Find somebody who's got experience in the area and who can, it kind of goes back to one of your other questions, who you can relate to. Mm-hmm. If you're an artist and you feel comfortable with that lawyer, okay, that's a good sign. If the person doesn't sit right with you, or if you don't feel like there's good communication, maybe they don't understand where you're coming from.
Yep.
If you're not feeling some sense of simpatico with your professional representative, look around, find somebody else who you do get that feeling with. That way there can be a good trade of information. You can instruct the attorney as to what you want. The attorney can present to you your options. Yep. And in such a way that you go, okay, I feel good about this. Let me look at these options. I trust my lawyer's judgment, and let me make a decision as an artist and instruct my lawyer accordingly.
So based on that, it's, don't go to the first entertainment lawyer you find. Seek services from several and then make your decision based on that.
Yeah, ideally, if time permits and you've got access, that would be the best way to proceed. Maybe you will be lucky, and that first entertainment lawyer that you meet, you hit it off.
Right.
This person's got the experience. You feel they get what you're doing, then you're good, and you can sort of move into that relationship with some confidence. If it doesn't work out 6 months down the road, again, you can discontinue the services and find somebody
Find
else.
someone else. You already talked about this. You said that usually there are no binding contracts between entertainment lawyers and musicians. Um, so let's move on to the next question here. Let's see.
I should just clarify there. There will be a retainer letter signed. If you're doing a 5% gross deal, there's a letter signed between you and the law firm that says that, yeah, I agree that 5% of my earnings will go. And the percentages can vary, but largely it's
Mm-hmm.
5%. So there is a binding agreement in place between the lawyer and the artist. However, the term is such that normally these letters say that the relationship can be discontinued at any time between the parties. One party just gives the other party written notice. And I've
Gotcha.
seen lawyers discontinue with clients. I've seen lawyers say, we can't represent you anymore.
Right.
Maybe there's nothing going on with that client's career,
Yep.
and the lawyer decides to pull the plug. Or maybe the artist says, I'm not happy with the advice I'm getting. The level of attention I'm getting is not good. I'm going to go elsewhere.
Yep.
You give the other side written notice. Sometimes there's a notice period, 30 days notice, but it's not a long period.
Mm-hmm.
And after which point the relationship is then over. So there will be an agreement so that the lawyer can say, okay, here's my authority to claim 5%.
Right.
And the artist has simply then got a written memorialization of that of that relationship, of that agreement, and they can, if there's any questions, they can go back to the written document, look at what it says, and hopefully that will answer any question that the artist has about the relationship.
Great.
So,
That's awesome. We talked about this as well, but you said average cost of hiring an entertainment lawyer is 5% if there's a retainer in place. Are there other circumstances where you can hire an entertainment lawyer, say by the hour?
Yes, and it just depends on how that attorney works and what their main business operational mode is. Generally, somebody newly called to the bar, maybe billed out by their firm, or if they're a sole practitioner, maybe billing out their services at somewhere in the range of $250 an hour.
Okay.
Then your senior attorneys, people with decades of experience, are probably going to be closer to the range of $400 to $600 an hour. There may be attorneys who charge more than that. Extremely specialized guys, probably being retained by large entertainment companies to do complex transactions. But I think that range that I've cited there, the $400 to $600 an hour, is probably more common for somebody with several, maybe 20 years experience, who knows the deals inside out and can provide you with competent opinions and work. When you're dealing with junior lawyers, you can probably expect that junior lawyer, if they're in a firm, is going to be consulting with a senior lawyer from time to time. They'll go through the deal. They'll go to the senior lawyer and say, listen, I've still got questions on this. How does this work? The senior lawyer may give some advice on the file and charge a little bit, but the bulk of the work may be passed on to a junior attorney who will be cheaper, but will probably take a little bit longer to go through the deals than somebody with more experience. So the trade-off is less time, more fees, versus more time and less fees. So
right.
It just depends. Again, I guess it goes back to how the artist feels about the lawyer that they're working with. And if they feel good about working with the junior attorney, if they understand each other, then that's the arrangement, and the party can continue on that way.
How can I find entertainment lawyers? I've sort of struggled actually with with this too. And what I did was I went onto Instagram, and that's how I found you, just by searching the hashtag entertainment law. But what is like the usual way of trying to find an entertainment lawyer? And are certain entertainment lawyers better for, let's say, a beat maker, producer versus a different type of artist, like a singer, songwriter, pianist, guitarist, etc.?
That's an interesting question. Entertainment law is not one of those things, in my experience, that one can advertise for, right? You see personal injury lawyers with their signs and billboards all over the place,
Yep.
saying, if you've been injured, dial 1-800-lawsuit.
Right.
And, it's easier for them to get out in the public eye. Entertainment law is a very specialized niche area of the law. I find that most clients get me by referral, either another musician or somebody who has a friend who knows of my services, tells that party looking for an entertainment lawyer, oh, you should call Quail.
Right.
I think most lawyers probably find that. If you're looking for an entertainment lawyer, therefore, hit the internet, hit the social media in the ways that you've done. That's going to be probably the best way to find somebody. Also, if you know somebody already in the business, ask them who they use.
Right.
And I know I get a lot of work that way, because somebody will come to me and says, I understand you work for so-and-so, got a similar problem, can we talk? And I take it from there. So if you've got another musician friend, somebody further up the food chain, as I say, ask them who they use.
Right.
That way you might build up a bit of a list of lawyers who are knowledgeable in the area, and you can reach out to them accordingly.
Great.
Your other question, is there within the music business lawyers who specialize in beat producers or other styles of music? Yes, there are.
Okay.
And you'd have to probably go through the same hoops to find those attorneys, find somebody who is, let me just get that shut off there. Sorry about that.
No worries.
You'll have to do a bit of digging to find somebody who is specializing in that area. But yes, there are differences. If you're a Nashville lawyer acting for country music songwriters, it's a very specific part of the business. You're probably going to be used to a certain way of doing things, versus acting for a beat producer who collaborates with rappers who then add vocals to what the beat producer has created. You've got to understand that world and just a little bit how it works. Same with electronic music. There are a whole bunch of different things that electronic music producers have to deal with that heavy metal people don't have to deal with.
Right.
So yes, there are, and that really they're just more practical matters. Not like the law is different, but there are just different practicalities one has to deal with in samples or collaborations and remixes, and just how all that works.
Yep.
But again, just to reiterate, dig in with your lawyers, and if you work in a specific genre and you do find a music lawyer, ask them what they do.
Yep.
Ask them, are you familiar with some of the issues that you've got on your table? I produced a track, you might say, I put samples in it. What do I do? And if your lawyer can't answer that, okay, find another lawyer.
Right.
And, you might ask your lawyer too, are they a player? In other words, what instruments do they play? I know personally, being a small-time electronic music producer, that because I understand what goes on in the studio, I find that helps me immensely when speaking with other, professional producers who do this 12 hours a day and longer. I can speak their language a bit. I understand what they're talking about, and I can help them zero in on some of the legal issues that they've got when collaborating, when remixing, when producing a track for somebody, a bigger name artist, and what points they should be looking for, and all that sort of stuff. So being a musician, being a producer yourself, often helps in coaching your client artist through some of these complex legal hoops.
They know the back end, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
They can speak
perfect.
the language and get clear instructions
Yep.
from the client. Be able, and more importantly, really, what you're doing as a lawyer often is presenting scenarios for your client. You know, you present them with options. You could say you could do A, B, or C, and you draw out why they could do A, B, or C, because you know the background, you know the gear, you know what's involved in sampling and interpolating other people's music, etc., or remixing, or what a producer actually does these days.
Mm-hmm.
Just on that point, I kid you not, I've had other music lawyers not understand what a beat maker does. They get guitarists, they get bassists,
Yeah.
they get drummers, but this person couldn't seem to understand what a producer does. And then you try to explain to them, well, they're like the band. They create the
Yeah.
music, and this concept was because they were used to dealing with record producers who might simply be in the studio, overseeing the engineer, running the board, helping the members of the band view their music from a different angle to maybe create a different different style of sound recording. They didn't understand what a beat producer does then.
Right. Right.
And I had to kind of really work through it with them. And this was an experienced entertainment lawyer. I was shocked. So I use that as an example to stress that musicians should ask their proposed attorney a little bit about, where they're coming from, what their background is, do they understand what is involved in the modern production studio in the modern world of music.
I think you hit it on the nail there, because the key word modern, because the music industry is constantly changing. How people produce music is constantly changing. So you should find an entertainment lawyer that's up to par with the modern world, right?
Absolutely.
Leading into the next question, if I'm offered a contract by a major label, what are some of the things that I need to look for in that language?
If you're being offered a contract by a major label, you can expect that you are going to be asked to sign your copyrights away for life of copyright and those copyrights would be all those created over a certain period of time. It could be a period of years, or it could be measured in a period of albums. They want you to deliver, X number of albums, and each album has to have between 10 and 12 sound recordings on it. Mm-hmm. That is going to probably stretch over a period of years, probably some of the most important years of your career, if it's the first deal you've signed. And that one point right there, they're going to sign your exclusive services for a period of time, needs to be looked at very carefully. And you've got to see what the record company is going to do in return, what type of promotion they're going to put behind, what they're going to pay for the creation of those recordings. So that set of rights is the first thing, without going too deeply into it. That's the first thing you've got to look at. Then you get into some of the other things, and maybe some of your viewers have heard of this concept called a 360 deal, where the record company is going to take a piece of all income streams. So the idea of a 360 being 360 degrees, your full circle of potential income streams. And in the music business, that's generally down to 4 things that you make money from as an artist: your sound recordings, your songwriting, your live performances, and any merchandise related to your career. So heavy metal guys sell a lot of black t-shirts. Techno artists don't sell that much merchandise. It's just, each genre has different things that they can capitalize on. Mm-hmm. Those 4 income streams are what you're going to make your living off of. Record companies, in the advent of online piracy and digital distribution, have seen their incomes cut substantially. So what they did over the past decade or 2 decades now, since the advent of Napster, is try to find ways to attach the other income streams that an artist might have. Mm-hmm. So that if the record company is going to invest $150,000, $400,000, $500,000 into an artist, they have some chance of making that money back.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll ask for some of the music publishing rights. They might ask for some of your live income stream to flow back to them, and then maybe some of your merchandise stream to flow back to them to pay off that big chunk of investment that they just put into you.
Yeah.
Those paragraphs have got to be looked at very carefully because you don't want them to be overreaching. You know, if that's the deal that's being offered and that's a take it or leave it type situation, then you need to make sure that you get the best deal possible if you are going to give up a chunk of all those other rights beyond just the sound recording rights. Because back in the day, when record companies could make a lot of money, all they really were interested in was the sound recording rights.
Yep.
Maybe they would get their sister publishing company, because all major labels have a major publishing company attached to them. Maybe they would push you or kind of nudge the artist towards the sister publishing company to do a deal. That way the parent company gets income from both sets of rights there. But nowadays, if a bigger deal is being offered, you can pretty well expect that that company, in return for the investment that they're going to put into you and all the money they'll put into marketing, social media management, et cetera, you can expect that they are going to want to get a piece of those other streams in order to recoup their investment.
That's great. And also I've heard horror stories about where, music producers or artists get these so-called advances, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they get $1 million advance, but in the contract it states that the record label will have to recoup that $1 million in forms of taking cuts from like all those things that you mentioned, merchandising, royalties, sound recordings, etc. So,
yes.
So if you see a contract that states, you have, we're going to give you $1 million in advance. Is that something that's, still popular today, or is that sort of an old school way of doing contracts?
Well, if you're being offered a major label deal, in other words, somebody's looking to pay to get your recordings made, and they're offering an advance. So in other words, some cash up front so that you can afford to record that album, that's still common. With modern production studios, many times the artists can create that record themselves and go to a label with a finished master.
Right.
And but at that point, the label will still often pay in advance. It may be a lot smaller because they don't have to fork out for big recording studio costs. But that advance could be used for other things. The artists always need money for something, whether it be touring or whether it be buying gear or whether it be, something, living expenses even.
Yep.
That money is often needed and necessary. But the concept is still the same. If the record company puts money into you, they want to get it back. So look at an advance like this. It is a prepayment of royalties.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get 25K, if you get $1 million, you will pay that back out of your royalty share, not the entire 100% gross income that your music made. You pay it back out of your share.
Yeah.
And that takes a while to recoup in many circumstances. Sometimes it doesn't even recoup, and the record company might on its books take a loss. But that is still common. You pay
Standard.
It back. What always throws people for a loop, though, in most record contracts, is that even after you pay it back, the record company still owns your masters.
Uh-huh.
And that's the equivalent of getting a mortgage on your house and paying the bank back all the money. And at the end of it, when you pay it all back, the bank still owns your house.
Right.
That would drive most people crazy. That is common in the music business. Record companies are in the business of building up their assets, ideally to a point where they might get bought by a bigger company and cash out for a nice chunk of change. And they can't do that if they only had a license on the masters for, a period of 5 to 10 years. They need to own those copyrights outright. It creates a valuable asset for them that they can then monetize or sell down the road. So that's their business model. They want to own copyrights and build that asset bank up.
Yeah.
So that's where an artist they've got to recognize that in the early part of their career, that's probably what they're going to have to deal with. They're going to have to sign those masters away. Unless, of course, they're happy to work independently, they can then pay for their own masters and license those to labels that are interested in them. Or they can do a deal, the common deal, where they sign the masters over for the first part of their career, but the moment they're finished that deal, they've got enough money to then pay for their own recordings. And then they, in this, probably the superstar era of their career, they license those masters back to a major label, but they never give up ownership. David Bowie famously had ownership of his masters throughout his very creative part, and was able to do all sorts of financial deals with those in the 90s, the Bowie bonds, things like that. He could do that because he owned his own masters.
Right.
Late period Rolling Stones, late period Led Zeppelin, same thing. They retained ownership because they could at that point. They had made enough money, they could afford to continue to invest in their careers, but maintain hold of those assets.
Do you see a lot of contracts like that where, record labels are actually willing to state in a contract that the musician can retain the masters?
All comes down to bargaining power. I see that with smaller independent or mid-sized independent labels who get presented with terrific work, and they want to do the deal, but the artist manager is saying, no, this is going to be a license. We're not going to sell it to you. But the record company wants the income. They know they can sell those records. It's going to be good for the label. So they do the deal. Yeah. And it comes down to bargaining power at that point. If you're some new artist from, out of nowhere, you've got some good social media following, but there's still a lot of work to do. The deal you may be presented with requires you to sign over the masters.
Right. Okay.
But if you've got a massive, if you blow up overnight on SoundCloud, and all of a sudden your track gets, you're pushing into millions of spins because you just go viral for whatever reason, you're in the driver's seat a little bit more. You've probably got a number of labels coming to the table, wanting to sign you up, and at that point your manager and or your lawyer can look at these deals and carve out a better deal for you and make sure that that maybe you do retain ownership of those masters, so that so that you can do further deals down the road. Yeah. You can just have more control over your assets as a professional artist.
Oh, this is a good one. Can entertainment lawyers help me in connecting with other people in the music industry, possibly that are higher in the food chain?
Absolutely. That is, if you have a well-connected entertainment lawyer, that is one of the services that they end up providing. You come to them with a problem and they say, well, why don't we go to so-and-so? I know this person, and it could be anything. It could be the services of another producer, another engineer. It could be a marketing person. Maybe you need a promo person in the UK. Mm-hmm. You're an independent artist. You've got something going on, but you need a promo person to help with social media management in the UK. Well, I'm sure that attorney probably knows somebody in the UK that they can connect you with. What was really common back in the 90s was to have entertainment lawyers shop your demo tape to A&R people at the major labels. And the A&R people kind of like this because the entertainment lawyer was probably they would act as a filter. And if the entertainment lawyer had good ears and could find other good artists, the A&R person was more than happy to take the meeting and listen to the demos and see what was going on. If they liked what they heard, they'd go see them live. That whole process would start, and ideally an offer would be made, and the entertainment lawyer would then negotiate that deal. So that was very much the model in the 90s when record labels were signing 10 artists, knowing that 7 would fail, two would break even, and one would hit so big they would pay for everything else.
Right.
Nowadays, what's happening is, yes, a lawyer may walk or send a link to a demo to an A&R person, but more often than not, the A&R person is scouring social media. They're going over Spotify lists. They're watching people on SoundCloud. They've got such an easier time, bigger scope, but an easier time finding stuff that they can then follow and decide, okay, this person's coming up nicely. Their follower count is growing on Instagram and on Facebook. Their spins on SoundCloud are going through the roof. We've got something here. Let's chase this down. They don't need the entertainment lawyer to walk in the demos so much because they're finding it. It's just easier to find.
Right.
But I do this periodically as well, where clients of mine, they're busy doing a bunch of things, and they're more than happy to use my services for me to then send out links to the various A&R people that I have contact with, and pitch those tracks, try to get deals for those tracks and get releases on those labels, and continue to create wealth and get money that way.
Okay, so we were talking a little bit earlier about how one could not have multiple managers because it's a binding contract. Would you say it would be beneficial to have multiple entertainment lawyers? I guess one entertainment lawyer watching the other lawyer. I've heard concepts about having multiple lawyers. What's your take on that?
Well, if probably in the beginning of your career, you're going to have one entertainment lawyer. Down the road, you may have more than one attorney simply because you've got so much going on. I know several artists who they have an entertainment lawyer, but then because they're resident in a foreign country, they've moved to Europe, for example, they have a business or a tax attorney in Europe who's able to guide them through the particular hoops that expatriates who live in a different country have got to jump through.
Right.
So yeah, at that point, depending on what you've got, or the business that you've got, yeah, you could have more than one attorney. Generally, I find that you've got one entertainment attorney who is the quarterback, who looks after your entertainment related work. That way there's no miscommunications, etc. I do see situations where somebody, let's say a copyright owner in the US, has an issue where one of their tracks is being copyrights being violated, or it's being pirated in, let's say, a European country. Then I'll help arrange that client to go and get an attorney on the ground in that European country to then prosecute in the courts whatever need be done. Sometimes, you'll often find in this day and age of the internet that an attorney will be called to the bar, admitted to practice in a particular jurisdiction, and then they're working internationally. Now, they're not providing laws or advice on the laws of France or of the UK or even another state or another province, because they're not licensed to do that. But what they are providing is business consulting advice on these record deals, on these publishing deals, because the points are generally the same. The pitfalls are the same, and they're guiding the client through that. If there's an issue that could go to court, or there's somebody gets a copyright infringement claim out of California, but they're based in the UK, then generally the entertainment lawyer's job at that point is to quarterback to get a qualified attorney in that jurisdiction to help you deal with whatever needs to be dealt with. Because at that point, you need advice on the laws in that jurisdiction. Go get a help from a qualified professional. It might be a tax problem. It might be a criminal problem. It might be an immigration problem. Maybe you crossed the border with the wrong papers, and now you've been barred entry. You're a touring musician. You need to get that problem fixed, or your career is going to have some issues. You go get an immigration lawyer and try to get your problem fixed. So that's a little bit of a picture on how the international world works when it comes to entertainment law and dealing with musicians crossing borders.
And that's really good to know that, a certain type of lawyer might only have jurisdiction over, like you said, a state, a country, a province, so it's good to know that because, maybe somebody that's just starting out doesn't understand the fact that this lawyer can only help you in, these borders. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
generally you will find that attorneys are qualified in one or maybe a few more states, provinces, or different jurisdictions in Europe. And again, they can give advice with respect to the laws of that jurisdiction. That's what they're admitted to practice. That's what they're qualified to do. But businesses are the same, depending on, sometimes these things are not border specific. An assignment of copyright in the UK or in Germany is going to look very similar to an assignment of copyright here. I'm generalizing, but in general terms, the ideas are the same. So the things that a lawyer can ask for are going to be the same to modify the deal. That's these are the sort of questions you need to ask if you're retaining a lawyer. Like how does your practice operate when it comes to international deals? Because if you're an electronic music producer, you might be based in Peoria, Illinois, but there may be German labels who are looking to sign your track. So what do you do? Are there experienced entertainment lawyers in Illinois? Probably a few in Chicago. But are they conversant with the laws of Germany? Probably not.
Right.
What do? Do you retain a lawyer in Germany?
Right.
Somebody you don't know, somebody who maybe there's a language issue. So these are things to raise with your attorney. And if this person's got the type of experience you're looking for, they'll be able to tell you, okay, this is how we arrange it. This is how you can be confident that the deal you're going into is looked after and is satisfactory for execution.
Is there any advice that you can give up and coming beat makers?
Yeah. The basic one is don't sign anything unless you get some legal advice on it. It's like that old commercial for Fram oil filters. You can pay me now or pay me later when your car breaks down. It's the same thing with entertainment lawyers. Find somebody who's willing to work with you, and maybe get a limit on the fee. Say, look, could you look at this thing? Could you give me, an hour's worth of time on it? Just give me some idea of what I should be asking for. Maybe I can't afford your full fee, but maybe I can afford some limited retainer. If you can just give me some advice of what I should be asking for. That simple act right there may save you a world of hurt down the road when you've signed something that might require a whole lot more of you than you expected. They may be asking for 3 more singles and you thought it was for 1 single, and now you're stuck. Right. Don't sign anything without professional advice. That would be the main thing, that I would recommend any person. That if you do that one thing, you're going to save yourself a world of headaches.
Mark, thanks so much for sharing all your knowledge with us. I really, really appreciate it. If one needs to find you, what is the best way to contact you, Mark?
Email is probably the best way. Get me at mark@markquail.com, and that's Mark with a K, and Quail is Quail, mark@markquail.com.
Perfect. Would you like to shout out your Instagram handle as well?
@Attorney General, all one word, is the way to follow me on Instagram.
Perfect. Great. Thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate it. For those of you that have some questions for Mark, please, be sure to follow him on Instagram and shoot him a DM. And if you are in need of an entertainment lawyer, seek Mark's services. Thanks again, Mark. Really appreciate you coming through.
Chris, thank you. I appreciate the time and great interview. Enjoyed it immensely. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care, Mark.